Beautiful art comes out of a beautiful process. Hi, I'm Angela Fehr. My channel is dedicated to helping you find more joy in your watercolor journey. If you love watercolor and want to grow your skills and really become your own favorite artist, I'd encourage you right now, just take a moment to subscribe to my channel. I have hundreds of videos, literally hundreds, here to help you grow to become your own favorite artist. Today's video is both a painting demonstration, a brush review, and an interview. There's a lot happening. I hope you'll stick around and watch the whole thing as I share what I've been learning in watercolor lately. Beautiful art comes out of a beautiful process. My priority when I come into the studio is to create that beautiful process, a beautiful space for me to create my art, and to get into a mindset that is reflective of that beautiful process. And so I really make it a priority to surround myself with some of my favorite things. I've made my studio a beautiful space, and I've shared pictures of it in the past. Although I have made art in much less comfortable places. It's all in making that tiny space, whatever small amount of time you have, and that small space that you have, receptive to your creativity. I love my favorite colors and choose my favorite colors, especially for the early warm-up part of my painting process. And I like to work with tools that feel receptive to my creativity as well. And lately I've been working with these brushes from Lebenzon brushes. I've been keeping the label on so I can keep track of the different types of brushes that I have, because I have a whole bunch of beautiful handmade brushes, and I want to tell you a little bit about those in my interview with Tracy Lebenzon, the maker of these handmade brushes, a little later in the video. But for now, we're just going to work with, right now, my favorite one, and that's this big guy here. And generally for choosing a favorite brush, I'm almost always going to go toward the large brush. And a big soft brush like this one, which is the goat and synthetic blend. It's a combination of fibers, so I get a bit of shape from the synthetic brush, and then the softness and the carrying quality of the goat hair. So I'm going to be working with that one today. And then the painting that I have here, I thought while we were talking about painting and creating a beautiful process, we'd also talk about how to use that first layer, where that promising first layer that maybe you stall out and don't know what to do next with. So I see, and I really like the shapes that I have here. I've got a trio really of sunflowers here in the center of my painting. So we're going to just keep drawing out those shapes. And I'm thinking I'm going to start doing that with a little bit of negative painting, very, very gently. And some beautiful brush strokes as well. Just mist it a little bit to wake up the paint. And then I think, looking at this violet, it's a little bit of a red violet. I have the feeling there's a bit of moon glow in this painting, but I think it's not alone. I'm wondering about, and one thing I like to do is, in these palette wells, you'll see the original color deep inside the well, but you can also see along the edge kind of a residue. And that tells me a little bit more about the color than that clump of hardened paint in the bottom. This is a mineral violet made by Holbein. And actually I'm liking that. It's kind of a reddish violet. It's very similar to what I have going on here. And I think paired with the moon glow, I'm going to get a pretty close match. So that gives me my three colors that are original to the painting, or at least approximately original. Let's just start with the mineral violet, and we're just gonna bring in a little bit of line to kick things off. And I was gonna immediately soften this mineral violet, but look how pretty those first couple of marks are. Really liking the zigzag stroke here that I created to give that edge, that kind of rough, the pointiness of the seeds inside the sunflower center. And I'm using a violet because violet is actually a wonderful color to use with yellow. It is a complement to a yellow, and so it really makes the colors in the center of the flower sing. And I'm using a damp a wet brush right now, just a little bit of water on the brush to create some line, and that's pulling some of the violet into the center of the flower. That's really pretty. And let's touch in a little bit of our Aussie red gold right now too. And that's going to create some pretty warmth in that part of the flower. Let's pull the moon glow in too. Let's work with all three colors. And I'm not thinking about the whole painting right now. I'm just looking at this little space in my painting. In a moment, I'll step back and look at the next place I want to place detail. But I want to start by just finding one shape to kind of kick off this painting session. And I'm really seeing that start to happen with this little puddle of interesting line in the center of the painting. A little bit more water on the brush. And right now I'm in the detail stage of the painting. This is, adding detail into the center of that flower. And that means I've been working mostly with the point of my brush to get some of those fine lines going. Let's pull out a petal shape, maybe right about here, with that side of the brush a little bit. And I started with the side of the brush, and then I just flicked up to get that little interesting point. And I'm touching the tail end of the purple that I placed there. And that's giving me some really pretty connection between those two shapes, between the petal I just painted and the violets in the center. They're flowing together. Really subtle, actually, and really pretty. Let's paint an edge of a petal here. And this one's not actually touching the center of the flower, but it's going to bring out that shape. I really like that. Maybe a little hint of more orange there, just to connect. And now I have this little threesome of petals. That's really pretty. Now the key here is I'm not worrying about the rest of the painting. Right now, I'm just trying to make this section connected, center, touching petals, and creating a bit of movement here. We're coming down, and I'm not really thinking about the rest of the painting. I had that little false start up here. I'm actually feeling a little more ready to maybe bring out some flower shape. Oh, there's some really pretty undertones of golden yellow, Aussie red gold here. And I'm just painting one flower. And it's really about being in the moment. I'm just focused on what do I need to paint right now. Let's make this section pretty. Truth is, if I make this section pretty and the rest of the painting bombs along the way, I'll just crop this out and keep this piece because it's pretty. Let's move over a little bit. See if we can't kind of echo what we've been doing over here. I kind of like what's going on. Let's maybe do one more petal here. Look at how this brush is starting to split now, and I'm getting this lovely calligraphic effect. Let's put a dot of water in here, maybe get a watermark going. But that brush, if it splits like that, I get a really pretty line. I'm going to move over to here and see if I can't do a little bit of what happened over here, create some of that same magic over here, starting with the mineral violet. There's a really beautiful warm patch here. I'm not going to cover that up. So let's just start with those little hash marks, zigzags over here, maybe a little bit over here. What I do over here, then I go and try to do it somewhere else again. I try to work with maybe broken lines where I've got pieces of shapes, and then I will look for a way to connect them with a damp brush maybe. And then we're just going to add some water, let that color flow. See how I'm making connections now, but keeping things soft and transparent. So I'm echoing those shapes right here, but then I'm also really lightening my value. I'm also not feeling tied to a perfect circle. My sunflowers are organic. If they're flowers, they're organic from nature, and so they don't have to be flawless. Perfectly round, perfectly sculpted. That's not why I paint. to capture perfection. I much prefer the slightly imperfect that we find in nature. And just again, repeating brush strokes, repeating shapes. And let's bring in some of that warm color, Aussie Red Gold. Oh, that's so pretty. Just tickling it in with a very, very gentle brush. And as well, I have Aussie Red Gold on my brush. It's a really good time to seamlessly create some petals extending out from the flower centers. So maybe one here and a little pal for it here, a little smaller one. And I'm going to alternate shape and size. You know, I have a large and a small. Let's put another shape up here. We've already got some big shapes that feel like petals. Maybe we just want to direct them a little bit. Could that feel more like a petal if I just pulled up from the center of the flower a bit? Oh, I kind of like that. I drew a couple of little loops here and they feel like drawings of petals. I'm okay with that. It's kind of a fun idea. I'm actually find that I use the point of this particular brush a bit more than I often use a large brush sideways. But because these brushes made by Lebenzon are, they don't have the metal ferrule, which means they're much gentler on the bristles of the brush. There's less breakage from bristles rubbing up against that metal sleeve. But I also find that I don't get quite as close to the paper if I'm holding the brush, you know, sideways and trying to paint. Which hasn't been a problem. I still have a very large body of the brush to work with. But I do always notice that anytime I'm working with a new brush, dramatically different profile like this one, then it's going to take me a little bit of time to find the sweet spot for what that brush can actually do for me. Really having fun just dotting in color. But I want a little bit richer color as well, so I am going to bring in a third color. Let's go with a color that I know and have tested to be a good pal to Aussie Red Gold, and that's this quinacridone sienna. And quin sienna is a very deep, rich orange rust, and we're just going to bring it right in here and see if we can't get some beautiful, even increase our warmth a bit with a little bit of that quin sienna. I'm going to put a little bit over here and a little bit over here just to find ways to unify it and introduce it into the painting. It's also going to actually bring out the shape of that little petal, which is, as it's dried, it's faded in a little bit to the background. So let's just carve out those shapes just a little bit better. Something that you will have a lot of fun with if you give yourself a chance is playing with the marks that a good brush can make. And different brushes excel at different types of marks, and that's why a watercolorist loves having lots of different kinds of brushes. You can have so much fun getting to know a brush for the things it wants to say with shape. And so this brush, and I find this with a lot of natural hair brushes because they're very, very soft. And I really like an extended point brush, a brush with a long body, because then you also get more of that expressiveness, because the bristles will twist and bend in ways that you don't get with a stiffer brush. And so have some fun. You know, placing the brush flat like this and then drag and lift. Use the point, scribble a bit. Isn't that fun? We get that little corkscrew bad hair day over here. Lovely little sunflowers. We always think of sunflowers as having faces, so it just makes sense to think about them having bad hair days too. Okay, this flower over here, we're going to move over to it. So we're going to start with the mineral violet again, that reddish violet. even though it really, this sunflower doesn't have the same reddish violet hints as these two did. And so we're going to just play with a little bit of line. And this is just kind of drawing our boundaries as well for that flower's center. In the first layer, the colors kind of flow out from the center. And so as we put that second layer on, we're defining the shape just a bit more. My brush is splitting into those multiple hairs again, and so it's a good time to create some little spiky marks. And I'm just going to glaze a thin wash of that violet over top of that wishy-washy center. And then I think we'll put in some warmth. Let's go straight in with the quince sienna. I'm curious as to what that'll do for my flower center. It'll darken it up and make things very much warmer. And I've got a nice puddle in there so the colors will flow together. Then we can grab a little bit of Moonglow. Moonglow is one of those colors that separates and creates multiple colors as it dries. It's got a blue in it, it's got a red, and it's got a yellow. And so those kind of revert to their own identity very delicately in that dried wash. And so that's giving us kind of a lot of rich dark there. And look at how creating that big rich dark shape really brings the eye to that part of the painting. So we're going to paint a few petals, and that will also help us to see whether or not this flower and these petals, if that kind of helps unify the painting as well. Sometimes something that looks out of place with those first strokes, once we've added the next few details, it kind of finds its voice a little bit more balanced. I don't know. There's a lot to like in this painting. I wanted to revisit this, and I can do that right now, I think, just with a little bit of water on my brush. I'm going to add some watermarks. That's going to push some of the color out from the center and lighten this part as I touch it with water. And then if I feel like I need to do more yet, once it's dried, I can add some more of these scribbly lines to create texture. Pausing to look, that is such an important part of the process. Beautiful paintings come from a beautiful process, and a beautiful process is not rushed. I'm a little bit curious as to whether or not a little bit of negative painting could help here. So I'm going to take my Moonglow and just try to carve out some background petal shapes with my brush. So I'm coming in, thinking about a flower petal right there, and then maybe a flower petal on this side, right there. And then for the rest of this color, I have to soften and flow right off to the edge of the page. Over on this side, maybe we just have a little negative shape here. Look at how strong and bold that shape is. Do we want to keep it strong and bold like that? Or do I soften it and let it flow? It's completely my decision. It's my painting. I'm going to try one over here. And I've been an inveterate line softener for many, many years. I'm always more comfortable with flow than I am with line, because I know how much air a line can take out of the painting, how much it can dominate. I'm really actually liking the way those dark shapes are serving my painting. I have the feeling I want one in this area somewhere. How about right here? And look at what a beautiful long shape I can create with this big brush. It's so pretty. So after I wrap up this demo, we're going to talk with Tracy Lebenzon about his paintbrushes. The more I talk to Tracy, I was first sent these brushes to try, and the more I talk to Tracy about his process, the more excited I got. This is someone who's making paintbrushes with a real eye for sustainability, and you'll be amazed to hear how he often uses repurposed or upcycled materials for his brushes, and how much time and care goes into the process. Making a paintbrush is a multi-step process. It takes a lot of attention to detail, and just like a painting. I've been wanting to finish this painting, I have to tell you now, for months. It's been on my list of things to do, and yet every time I pulled it out, I really didn't see the logical next step. And I frequently will tell my students, take your time. If you're not seeing that logical next step, it is okay to wait. But there are, here I am, still not seeing the logical next step. But once I started painting, because I really think because I was working with colors I love, with a beautiful process, it made it much easier to be in tune with the painting and just focus on that first step. What does the painting need? And build my painting out from there. It's so exciting to see those second layers start to come to life. Hugely challenging as well, because the more time you spend on a painting, the easier it is to overwork it, make a mistake that you regret. And so I'm really staying focused on what does the painting need right now, not feeling like I just need to put in X amount of hours to finish this painting. No, I'm going to just take my time. Most of the time, if I stop a painting when I think I'm almost done, when I check it out the next morning, I realize that I really was done. I just didn't have the perspective to recognize it yet. And so that's always exciting to realize. And it helps me to know that one way to avoid overworking is to stop painting when you feel like you're almost done. Okay, let's call this finished and move over to our chat with Tracy Lebenzon of Lebenzon Paintbrushes. So the brushes I'm holding today are Lebenzon paintbrushes. These brushes are really special. They're very unique. I don't think I've ever seen another handmade brush quite like them. And I'm still getting to know them. I can't wait to show you a little bit about my painting process as I start to use them. But I also wanted to talk to the manufacturer, the artist who makes these brushes. And I say artist because they really are beautiful works of art. And as Tracy Lebenzon and I interacted by email talking about the brushes and planning how I was going to get these brushes in my hands so I could give them a try and review them, I just kind of was so engaged by his enthusiasm for the product and his true passion for what he's doing. So I invited Tracy here to tell me a little bit about the paintbrushes that he makes. So hi, Tracy, welcome.
Angela, hello, welcome. Thank you so much for your time.
Tell me, first of all, I guess, a little bit about the philosophy of how you're making these brushes and why they're so unique.
Well, the philosophy is to build a better paintbrush. One of my goals is to make it easier for artists to produce artwork. Part of what I did was to innovate and design the brushes in a way that nobody else does. One of the main failings of paintbrushes, which are the thing you find on every single one of them, which is a ferrule. And the ferrule is a great tool. It makes the brush feel more precise, but the trade-off for that is that it is actually designed to help accelerate the wear of a brush. So mine are designed differently. It's part of the reason they don't have a ferrule is the ferrule. If you've ever had, as example, a paper clip and you bend the paper clip back and forth, the stress that you put where it gets bent causes the paper clip to fracture pretty quickly, and that's steel. Well, hair or synthetics work in exactly the same way. And the ferrule puts an enormous amount of stress right where the brush comes into contact. So that's one element of it. The bigger elements are brushes which provide really good feedback. I offer 16 different types of bristle material. Those are so that you can match the perfect feedback with the material that you're working with. So it's designed to match a particular kind of technique with the materials, and it makes it easier to paint if the brush can keep up with you.
Yeah, I'm really noticing that with the brushes that you've sent to me. A number of the ones that you sent are using goat hair, and some of those are a goat and synthetic combination.
Right. The goat hair is the most widely used brush all over the world. They're very absorbent, very soft. One of my innovations was to add the synthetic blend, about 10% synthetic hairs along with the goat hair, and the end result is a brush that produces a very fine tip, has a really good subtle feedback, and has a tip that is roughly the diameter of a human hair. So it's a really good hybrid and a blend of two different painting materials.
Now some of my students are cautious about using natural hair. I feel like natural hair holds most of the time, because it's got the tiny little scales on the hairs, it's going to hold more water, it's going to hold more paint. So I really like using a natural hair brush. But I really got excited when you commented that your sustainable practice actually makes it a little bit easier to use natural hair if you are trying to be conscious of animal protection and so forth.
Definitely so. The one of the big debates I had when I went into this was the ethical elements about the paintbrush industry. There are a lot of bad things that are said, deservedly so, about the way that a lot of the materials come to paintbrushes. And I had a real problem with that. So I found a way by means of doing what's called repurposing or upcycling, or in other words, searching through the internet. I found estate sales to be the best place to find a lot of the materials for some of the non-renewable materials. And then things like goat hair, going back to that, which are infinitely renewable. The goats get a haircut. I don't know how often, it varies with the breed, but usually once or twice a year. And so no real harm comes to the goats by doing that. And I have several different materials that come that way. Otherwise, mostly there's one or two exceptions that I actually haven't started working with, which are all designed by repurposing or upcycling. Specifically, I get like a hide or something.
Like maybe a fur coat or something, and be able to use the fur from that for a brush?
Essentially, yes. What happens is that people get treasures throughout their lives, and then sooner or later, all these treasures find it into the closet, and then on the floor of the closet, then there's these things called estate sales, and that's where I find an awful lot of the materials that I use. And that's for the natural hair materials. And it's, like I said, at the outset, it was a real issue for me. At the risk of revealing a mild detail, I actually talk to some of the hides when I'm trimming the hair off of them, because I do have a sense of guilt for doing that. But I didn't support the industry. I'm getting life out of something that would otherwise end up at Goodwill, and I help thousands and thousands of people create art. So it is a rationalization, that's for sure, but a good one.
And you do the synthetic brushes as well for people who just don't want to have any animal products, or maybe prefer the feel of a synthetic because they do have a different kind of flex and so forth.
Yeah, very definitely so. I currently offer 4 different types. I'm actually going to be starting a 5th type before too long. The synthetics have a better springiness to them. They also outlast natural hair brushes, all things being equal, by quite a bit. I like to say that I get my synthetics from unicorns that come and visit my studio in the spring. It's a good joke. And but in reality, I get them from the best suppliers in the world for the materials. If you were to look at it with a magnifying glass or probably a microscope, you'd see that the individual fibers are both textured, or etched is the proper word, and also tapered towards the tip. So not only do they have a good springiness, they hold a lot more liquid. They still won't, well, they will compete if you use like a gum arabic or something to make the paint you're working with slightly more viscous. The more viscous, the more the difference between natural hair and synthetic disappears. And it doesn't really take a lot to balance the difference out. And but all things being equal, water paints being very thin material by their nature, a natural hairbrush will far outperform a synthetic. And that's part of why I did the goat and synthetic blend, because it takes the best of both worlds, and also why I offer a variety of others.
One thing I've noticed is that for many of these brushes, the handle is quite thick, and I really like that, because I often get emails from students who maybe have arthritis or have trouble gripping a skinny brush handle. And so something like this that has a more substantial grip is really nice for an artist who might have trouble with the grip.
Well, thank you so much. Well, part of the innovative design is in offering materials which are easier on the hand. The brushes being slightly larger diameter, they actually relax the hand substantially. Part of it's built into the nature of bamboo. You have to have a certain diameter piece of bamboo to be able to get the diameter of the bristle. The diameter is based on the size, but the real good thing about it is that they, compared to any other brush you put your hands on, they're both very soft to the touch. The smaller ones have a very, very subtle flex to them. I don't know if you've picked that up yet, but And also, if you have, everybody has hand strain, if you press on the bamboo, it will actually flex ever so slightly. So it's far different from pressing on a more firm surface. So the other part of the design and is to create them so they're far more comfortable on the hand than anything else. And then back to the,
Yeah, I really like to think about my brush as being an extension of my hand. So I want something that's going to feel loose in my grip and feel natural. Absolutely. You want that process to feel as intuitive as possible.
and that was a big part of the design, is to make them as comfortable as possible. Some people refer to it as the handshake. And if something, most paintbrushes are very hard. Some manufacturers are coming out with some very soft vinyl surface on them. And the other part of the bamboo that's really cool, that's unobvious, is that it's an irregular surface. And the consequence of the irregularity is that as you use it, you can rotate it ever so slightly and it changes the way it feels in your hand completely. And people love that. It's so subtle you don't even notice it. But if you hold a paintbrush, as I bet you do, for many hours a day, it makes all the difference in the world for the comfort of it.
Yeah, and I'm always paying attention to my grip because my grip tells me how relaxed I am and you know, how much control I'm trying to master over the brush and the paint. So that's something I'm always paying attention to. And I've really noticed that, yeah, the grip, because, you know, this brush has a slight curve to it, so then my grip and the way the brush moves changes as well. Personally, I love an organic stroke. I want a brush stroke that almost looks like a human didn't make it. It almost looks like the brush just fell into place. And so I want, you know, that process to be as organic as possible as well. Well, and I like too that, you know, when I was first painting, I was using more economical brushes. I was getting the cheapest thing I could afford, really. And those brushes so often were, had a lot of paint on the handle and it would flake off. You know, the ferrule would rust and the wood would swell, and all of those things made the brush just didn't last super well. And when that paint starts to flake off, then you've got a rough surface. So here we have something that's, you know, not going to change significantly over time, which I really like.
And thanks, they are very soft to the touch also. And bamboo is naturally mostly impervious to paint. If you're working with enamels, enamels stick to almost anything, but generally speaking, it's not going to be affected, and it will stay. They actually get more and more comfortable over many years of use. I also, because of the way they're made, I have a lifetime guarantee on the materials and the workmanship. I'm very confident that, unlike inexpensive brushes, which are largely designed to fall apart, these will last for decades. I have some of the people that have used brushes for upwards of 30 years. And that's saying something about a paintbrush.
Well, and a brush really does become like a good friend. You don't want to let go of it when it's performing well. So it's nice to know they last like that. Now, the one thing I have noticed that has caused me to need to get used to these brushes and paint a little bit differently than I'm used to is because they don't have a ferrule, we have a wider base here where the bristles come out. And so I think for me, that was my biggest learning curve, is just getting used to that feeling of how easy it was to feel the bamboo handle touch the paper. And I'm just, but because I often use the side of the brush as well as the point. And so I'm getting to know that a little bit. But I really do like the fact that I don't have a metal ferrule to scratch the paper, which can happen if I'm not careful.
And yeah, that's one of the major differences between the brushes. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the part of it is designed so that it reduces the stress on the bristle. And it does require a slight adaptation of technique. And it's just built into it. I have smaller diameter brushes which get around that, but the larger ones, it's simply built into it. So
yeah, like a smaller brush like this, there's just a softer transition, so you don't notice it as much. But personally, I like the fact that there's something that forces me to adapt, because again, it encourages me to be creative and find creative solutions. Anytime I have to change something, I find new discoveries along the way. So yeah, I'm enjoying that.
yeah, it's amazing where that stuff comes out. It also helps with technique. If you're too far over on the brush, you're probably tired in one form or another.
As I've been getting to know the brushes, there's quite a few that I have here that are quite small. This is a synthetic, and I've already stained it with phthalo blue. It just happens.
Sure.
But I'm amazed at the very delicate strokes that I can create with these brushes. I have a lot of small brushes in my studio, but they don't, the fineness of the stroke that I'm getting with these brushes is actually greater than I would find from a brush of the same size and a different brand, maybe a machine made brush.
And my brushes are all based around calligraphy brushes. Calligraphy brushes are by far the most versatile, and they have a history that goes back thousands of years, back literally to the dawn of writing. They are by far the most versatile. I bring in some 21st century technologies along with them, as well as techniques in making them. But the real distinctive feature is the one that you had. And by the way, you can probably clean that off either with paint thinner. Not that it's that important to keep the brush that clean. I'm a little on the OCD side of that because I make the new brushes and I see them as new things more than things that get used. But I do clean my own brushes that I use to, if you notice, the ends of the brushes are painted on both the ends and then in the middle. And I use usually paint thinner to clean them off at the end of every session, and they come back pretty clean. And the material that I use to bond the brushes is not hurt by that at all. But
yeah, that's good to know. I was curious about that. Like with a handmade brush, you're always going to see a few hairs come off the brush as you're starting to paint. People who are using factory-made brushes might be finding that a little off-putting at first, that feeling of, oh no, I'm losing hairs, but it is part of that handmade process. I've had other handmade brushes that do the same thing.
well, in answer to the part about bristles falling out, mine don't have a lot that fall out. It's kind of built into the process. What happens is that well, first, the bristles are much larger than you might think. They're upwards of 2.5 to 3 inches long, depending upon which particular type of bristle. And they're glued way back inside of it. And that's what gives the bristle a nicer feel to it. And the material I use, I went through, I'm going to make up a number, it's not unreasonable. I went through over 20 different types of different glues and bonding agents before I settled on the one I do. And it just does everything very, very nicely, and it's largely impervious to wear and tear by itself. You can dissolve it if you get it hot enough, but it's hotter than anybody will ever actually use. And I'm actually working on another line now. One of the areas that I make brushes for are for people that work in both pottery and batik and a wide variety of paints. And if you're working, some people use wax is what I'm getting at. And so I'm looking into some higher temperature glues and bonding materials that can stand up to 200, 300 degrees without starting to come apart. It's way overkill for paintbrushes as a rule, but for that particular genre, not so much.
Well, I loved hearing that how deep the brush actually goes into the handle, because as I'm painting, there is that part of me that feels like, oh, maybe there's just a fraction of inch there and I need to be concerned. And it's, I'm glad to know that's not the case, that, I can swish it around in the water. I don't have to worry about, affecting any glues or anything. It's such a different feeling getting used to a brush that doesn't have a ferrule. And so I have to learn to trust it a little bit.
And, yeah, you'll relax into it over time. And the other element regarding hair falling out, it happens a little bit. What the process is you glue the hairs at the end of the brush. I try and get about a half an inch on there. Every now and again, no matter how much I try, there'll be some hairs which are a little bit shorter, and those will shed. Other times, the material I use to bond the brush, sometimes a bubble will form, and I test them. One of the tests that I do is called a tug test, and that's where I literally pull on the hair. And if it survives that, I know it's pretty well. But sometimes it will be like the head of a pin, and depending upon the brush we're talking about, that could be 20 or 30 hairs that will shed. It's always in the very center of the brush where that happens. Yep. So
and those are always bristles that wouldn't have done you any good in the painting anyhow. Because
it's a small amount overall, but people certainly care, and I do my best to have them come out flawless. But so far, I've sold over 5,000. I have never had a return or even a complaint, and so I'm very happy about that.
Absolutely.
Built in sooner or later, I'm going to screw it up sooner or later, but that's part of the reason I have the guarantee, because I realize.
That's what's so great about dealing with a person. One thing I love about watercolor is that so many of the products we used are made either handmade or made by individuals or family-owned businesses, and so we get to actually make a personal connection with the product. And I mentioned at the beginning that these are like magic wands. And you made the same comment, and they really do. Anybody who's a fan of Harry Potter will instantly make that connection. But as a watercolor artist, that's really what I want my brush to be. And so it's so exciting to make my process of painting more beautiful, more intuitive, and more natural. So I really want to thank you for caring enough about paintbrushes to really get to know all of these different aspects that make your brushes so unique. And your hand's been on every one of these. I think that's amazing. The more I look at them, the more I see little attention to detail in the carvings on the handle. The one I was commenting, this one has a little brush hanger. It's this little twig on the side.
Right.
So yeah, just that's so cool.
And thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure to talk about these a little bit. And as I said, it's a new type of thing. I've gone from relative obscurity. My background is doing art shows. This year, the entire trade show industry has come to a grinding halt for this minor problem we all seem to be sharing. And so the outreach to the internet has been a very new thing for me. It's kind of taking on a life of its own in a very good way. And I'm grateful for your indulgence of trying my brushes and seeing that not everything that is, you can make something different and still be a really nice, high quality product.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and your product. I have a coupon code for anyone who wants to give these brushes a try. You can save 20% using the code Angela, and I'll link up Tracy's website, Lebenzon Brushes, down below as well. Thank you.
Terrific. Angela, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. As I talked to Tracy, I was just reminded again of how art happens in so many different forms. It's not just happening when we're making paintings, but anytime we're crafting with care and intention, getting our ideas out, working with our hands, art is taking place all over the world. I love that in using the brushes that I used today, I'm partnering with someone, creating, really bringing his. I love that as I use Lebenzon brushes, I'm taking an artisan-made brush and bringing it into my own painting process. It really felt like a continuation, creating the life of the brush and bringing my painting to life. What an amazing kind of miracle, and just a beautiful process that you may not see it when you're standing in a gallery looking at paintings, but when artists bring and lend themselves to that process, that passionately, it really has a transformative power. It's something that just gets me really excited, and I love to share it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing more videos, great products for watercolor artists, and as always, tips to help you grow as an artist and encouragement to help you find more joy in your watercolor journey. Bye for now.